Okay, looks like our participant numbers there have stabilized. I'm going to go ahead and kick us off this morning. Welcome everyone to our quarterly meeting for the Northern Colorado Health Sector Partnership. I am Joanne Herkenhoff representing UC Health, and I am one of the co-chairs for the partnership. A few housekeeping items before we get going this morning. You guys are very familiar, I'm sure, but please keep yourself on mute. We invite you to utilize the chat function to engage with us this morning. And you can also use the reaction buttons as well as we hear from our presenters. I will remind you that we are recording this session this morning. And we're going to kick off with notice that our annual report has been released. Nikki will pop a link into the chat so you can pull that up and take a look. It is posted on our website as well. I want to also give a huge shout out to Yvonne Myers. She is our outgoing co-chair for the sector partnership. Yvonne has been with us since the inception of this partnership and has an incredible eye for the community and has led this partnership well. She has recently switched roles and is rolling off as our co-chair. And on that note, I'd like to welcome Angela Richard with Banner Health. She is taking over the co-chair role with me at this time. Okay, so we're going to get started this morning with our apprenticeship update. I'd like to welcome Nancy Murray and Melissa English with the State Office of the Future of Work. And I'm going to turn it over to Chris Houston to take it from here. Thanks, Chris.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for your time this morning. My name is Chris Houston. I work as the Director of Healthcare Apprenticeships with Front Range Community College, and I serve as the co-chair on the Workforce Development Committee. And I am excited to bring together some real experts in the field of apprenticeships, Melissa English and Nancy Murray. So we're going to present to you some information about apprenticeships and using this as a solution for, as we know, some of the workforce pipeline issues we're experiencing. So Melissa, I'll be happy to advance the slides, but I'll let you go ahead and start.
Great. Well, thank you, Chris, and good morning, everyone. So I'm Melissa English, and like Chris said, I'm with the Colorado Department of Labor and Employment Office of Future of Work. And I'm an apprenticeship specialist there. And I'm just going to share a little bit kind of generally about registered apprenticeship, and then I'm going to pass it over to Nancy to get more specific about healthcare apprenticeships. So just kind of framing registered apprenticeships, they are just a magnificent workforce solution. They are really industry driven. So employers are always at the core of registered apprenticeships. And they are a great way to look at what your workforce challenges might be, and then creating a solution to help solve those challenges. And they really are career pathways where employers are developing and preparing their future workforce. And on the flip side, an individual or an apprentice is able to obtain paid work experience because they are an employee during an apprenticeship, where they're getting related instruction from organizations like Front Range or a variety of other places that we'll talk about. And at the end of an apprenticeship, they're receiving a variety of different industry recognized credentials, like a farm tech certification or something like that. But they're also receiving a US Department of Labor nationally recognized credential as well. Next slide. Within registered apprenticeships, I always like to just talk a little bit about pre-apprenticeships because they're a great way to help prepare individuals to move into apprenticeships. And so we work a lot with organizations to help them develop pre-apprenticeships as well. We talk about pre-apprenticeships in the context of high quality pre-apprenticeships because high quality pre-apprenticeships meet these criteria. So they always are working with a registered apprenticeship program. So they're going to pipeline directly into one of the registered apprenticeship programs that we have in the state. They have at least one industry recognized credential. They are a great starting point for any underrepresented career seeker or student who is looking at a career path. And they help to meet entry requirements. So if there are minimum requirements for a registered apprenticeship, they're going to help that individual meet those minimum requirements and prepare for success in a registered apprenticeship program. So pre-apprenticeship programs are a great way to help anyone prepare for the registered apprenticeship. Front Range has done some great work with pre-apprenticeship programs, and a lot of other organizations do great work around pre-apprenticeship. So we'd like to really talk about that design option when we're talking about apprenticeships. Next slide. I always love to talk about the benefits of registered apprenticeships, both for the employers as well as the apprentices, because it really helps to get the full picture of why an organization might want to explore registered apprenticeships. I think the most surprising thing when we're talking about something that you're registering with the US Department of Labor, which is a government organization, is how customizable registered apprenticeships are. You don't really think of something that's government connected as being particularly flexible and customizable, but registered apprenticeships are that. So we work with our employer partners to say, what are your needs? And then we customize specifically to those needs so that you are getting really highly skilled employees that meet those needs. Another benefit is that apprenticeships really emphasize safety. As you're developing out your program, you are focusing on what skills, what training do you want them to have. And because of the outline that a registered apprenticeship program creates, it just really focuses on that safety. And when we have a safe program, it reduces workers' comp. So the HR person in me loves when we talk about reducing workers' comp costs. So that's always exciting for me. Doesn't always excite everyone, but it excites me. The other pieces that are benefits is that it is enhancing employee retention. So when we look at employee retention of apprentices, we're looking at the apprentices staying with a employer after the completion of an apprenticeship program. So an apprenticeship program varies in length, depending on the occupation. It can be anywhere from 1 year of full-time employment, so 2,000 hours, to several years, dependent on, again, on the occupation. But we're looking at 9 months after the completion of that apprenticeship program, 91% of apprentices are still with that same employer. So that's a pretty high retention rate. And so that is just really creating a stable pipeline of qualified workers. And so if that's a workforce challenge that an employer is trying to solve, apprenticeships are a really great way to solve that and lower those costs. The other great benefit is really helping to facilitate a transfer of knowledge between employees to new recruits. So we see a lot of our workforce is retiring, and when someone leaves, they're walking out the door with a lot of great knowledge, unfortunately. And not everyone is writing all that knowledge down and creating a great handbook. But because apprenticeships have a mentor or preceptor component to them, this is a wonderful way to get that knowledge to the apprentices and to the new employees. And so it's creating that employee succession plan. And to kind of piggyback off that idea, that mentorship and preceptor is getting an opportunity to get leadership opportunities within the organization. So if there aren't opportunities for them maybe to become a supervisor or to move up within the organization, they are gaining those leadership skills and professional development skills by becoming a mentor or preceptor. I always do get the question about, are the mentor and preceptor going to have to spend a lot of time off the floor with the apprentice? And we really want you to know that it is a balance for sure. And, it takes a lot to train someone, but it is a great way to share that knowledge, and you can break up that knowledge between a lot of different mentors and preceptors. So, the apprentice is getting experience between a lot of different mentors, seeing how to do the job in a variety of ways. And you don't always have to have that best employee kind of being that preceptor or mentor all of the time. The benefits to the apprentice, also great. That apprentice is learning the exact skills that the employer is looking for. So they know that it is really valuable to that future employer. They're getting wage increases throughout the apprenticeship. So we'll talk about that in a minute. And that practical on-the-job training. So they know exactly what they're learning in the related instruction. They're going to apply on the job, and apprentices really like to be able to apply, that classroom learning on the job. There's a couple components to registered apprenticeships. So like I was talking about the wage progression, there is a requirement that every apprentice needs to earn at least minimum wage or higher. And then there is a minimum of 1 interim wage progression. So they will need at least 1 wage increase. So as their skills or knowledge is increasing, their wage will increase, but the employer is going to decide exactly what that wage increase is and when it happens. Usually it'll happen, when an employee or an apprentice has reached a certain amount of hours. So if the apprenticeship is 2,000 hours, they'll say, well, when the apprentice has hit 1,000 hours, they'll get a wage increase, or when they have earned a certain certificate, they'll get a wage increase, but the employer can decide that. The next component is on-the-job learning. So that is the hands-on component. It's a minimum of 2,000 hours or 1 year of full-time employment. And each occupation is going to vary. So the US Department of Labor has decided and kind of set standards depending on different occupations, but it will never be less than 2,000 hours. And we can help, if you have questions about any particular occupation, we can let you know what that is. And then the related instruction component is that educational component. And that is in the classroom. That can kind of happen anywhere. It can be very formal, like at Front Range. If you as the employer have kind of formalized training, it can happen at the employer. And it is recommended of 144 hours per year of related instruction. And then the last piece I want to talk about before I hand it over is just, we have a couple different roles within a registered apprenticeship. So as I mentioned, the employer is absolutely the most important. They are the ones employing the apprentice and providing the on-the-job learning. They're going to drive the program design. And they are also potentially going to provide the related instruction. The sponsor is the individual that is going to be responsible for registering and administering the registered apprenticeship program. They work with the Department of Labor to do that. And that sponsor could be really a variety of different organizations. It can be the employer, it could be a sector partnership, it could be a labor or union, it could be a community-based organization. So Boulder Chamber is a sponsor, or any other workforce intermediary. The related instruction provider is going to be the one that comes in and provides that related instruction. Like I mentioned, Front Range is one of those related instruction, but we have a lot of employers that provide related instruction. We have other training providers we work with. The K-12 system provides a lot of related instruction for us. Some unions provide it. So really, we work to determine what is the best fit for related instruction. And then the last role is a supportive role that provides supportive services. These complement program design and just make sure that the apprentice and employers are supported. It can be both monetary or non-monetary supportive services. And this just is, like I said, ensuring that success. And it can be provided by, again, anyone. A lot of the time, the workforce comes in and provides that. Our educational partners can as well, or the employer provides a lot of the supportive services. So I will pass it over to Nancy to talk a little bit more specifically about healthcare apprenticeships.
Good morning. So I'm Nancy Murray, and I am a statewide apprenticeship consultant. I work with the Colorado Workforce or Colorado Urban Workforce Alliance. So there are 5 of us apprenticeship consultants who work with businesses all across the state. And I work very closely with Melissa to help businesses understand how to develop a program and then kind of get it through the process of getting it registered. In Colorado, a lot of folks are thinking of apprenticeships as something that folks do who are working in the trades. And while that is correct, there are also a lot of other kinds of apprenticeships here in Colorado. And we have healthcare apprenticeships, obviously. There are 258 active registered apprenticeships in Colorado and over 5,000 apprentices in apprenticeships in Colorado. 36 of those apprenticeships are healthcare related apprenticeships. And 370 apprentices right now are currently working in healthcare related apprenticeships. And that may be surprising, but there are actually quite a few programs that are happening. Some of those are here in northern Colorado, and some are throughout the state. Centura, Banner, CU, Columbine Health Systems, up here in northern Colorado. We also have Associates in Family Medicine, Kaiser, Kindred Hospital. So there's, as I said, quite a few employers who are utilizing this tool. And there are many other opportunities. So this is the list of apprenticeable occupations. So these occupations have already kind of been looked at, have been vetted and determined to be apprenticeable. The ones that are in red are occupations where we already have apprenticeship programs in the state of Colorado. So you can see that there are quite a few. And that the specialties that actually could take on an apprenticeship are pretty varied here, from behavioral health, direct patient care, lab things, lab specialties, more management administrative kinds of programs, and then just a variety of other specialties. Actually, Chris, if you can go back to that, thank you. One thing that I did want to say is everyone who goes through a registered apprenticeship, when they finish that apprenticeship, they get a certificate from the U.S. Department of Labor. But in healthcare apprenticeships, they also almost across the board are also receiving whatever the industry standard credential or certification is. So an apprenticeship is not bypassing credentialing in the healthcare system. It is part of the program. It is a way to enhance the classroom training, the certification, and to really, I think, allow an employer to gain some value from that individual as they're learning their skills, to get them on board and help them understand the culture, the specific needs of a particular office or facility or program. So just want to be clear that the apprenticeship programs don't bypass credentialing, which I know is absolutely essential in the running of healthcare facilities, but incorporates those credentials into the program. Go ahead, Chris. Thank you. So a couple of things that we wanted to share is there are supports for both employers and apprentices that may be helpful as you're looking at, is this something that our organization can do? First up, the most recent kind of rounds of grants that were written by the state included a scale-up grant, and CDLE will be issuing these grants from $10,000 to $50,000 for launching and expanding registered apprenticeships. These were kind of in response directly from businesses that said, there's a cost sometimes to developing these programs and kind of getting them going and up and off the ground. And so these scale-up grants are a way to maybe help address some of those issues. Nikki, I believe you'll be sending this PowerPoint out, and when she does, this scale-up grants is actually a link to information about the scale-up grants. And It's on the CDLE website. I tried to find an easy way to Google it, and unfortunately, it wasn't that easy to Google. But if you click on this link, you can get to the information directly about those grants. Co-Helps is another grant. Chris is very involved, and I believe all of her work is around the Co-Helps grant. And this is funding that is specifically designed to support the development of registered apprenticeship programs in healthcare. So, you can work with somebody who really understands healthcare, support the design and the development of those programs. There are some employer incentives for smaller employers, 50 or less. And then there are also some supports for the apprentices directly for supportive services. So that's another support that exists out there for businesses. And then there are apprenticeship scholarships. So there is funding available to help support that apprentice. So if an apprentice is going to a training program and may need to pay for that training, there are scholarships out there that are available for those folks if they are part of a registered apprenticeship. We have 2 grants going at the time, so depending on kind of where they are in their process, they could range from $500 all the way up to $3,000 for eligible apprentices. So that's helpful, hopefully, to support the overall program, not only the development of the program, but then those folks going through the program. And now I'm going to turn it over to Chris to talk about some specifics.
Thank you, Nancy. I appreciate that. As you can tell from listening to our partners with the Colorado Department of Labor, this really is geared towards meeting employer needs. And our Co-Helps grant that I work under is a U.S. Department of Labor grant that is really done in partnership with the Department of Labor and the Department of Higher Ed, along with about 12 of our largest industry partners in Colorado. And it was based on the needs, even prior to COVID, to pathway more individuals into the healthcare working area and receive the training while they do that. So as Nancy mentioned, there are a lot of different occupations that are apprenticeshipable, and these are some of the current occupations that we're working in the healthcare area. I would say that medical assisting and sterile processing technician are probably our largest, and we're really starting to grow the certified nurse aide and medication aide. So my goal is to talk a little bit about how the specifics of these apprenticeships are implemented. And this work is industry driven. And so up north, we are partnering with UC Health in offering sterile processing. Centura offers about 5 different occupations. We're working with Columbine to offer the certified med aide. Associates in Family Medicine was actually the very first medical apprenticeship in the state. We're looking at pathways, and we have a new group at Banner Medical Group of medical assistants. So you can see that we meet with both large and even, as Nancy mentioned, we have benefits for small employers. So we have much smaller employers as well. So as Melissa mentioned, the related instruction is a critical component of an apprenticeship. We have the benefit of having that on-the-job learning, but we also want to provide the related instruction that complements that on-the-job learning. That's typically a minimum of 144 hours, and that can be dispersed over the entire year that someone is apprenticing. However, most of our apprenticeships in healthcare are really based on kind of an early related instruction component, and then they continue to work with the preceptor. Now, one of the things that's important to remember, it doesn't mean that these individuals as an apprentice can't be working alone, can't be working in a certified role. It just means that they continue in that apprenticeship role with the guidance of a preceptor. One of the nice things about apprenticeships is they are very industry driven and flexible. So we provide related instruction either on campus or on site with the employer. A good example of that is Front Range's sterile processing program. We actually work with our industry partners to provide the training on site. A lot of our industry partners really enjoy that on-site training because you get to learn the systems on site, and we combine that with a very robust kind of a didactic component. Our apprenticeship related instruction is really geared towards minimizing the time that they need to be away from their on-the-job learning. And we typically offer all of our coursework 1 day a week or evenings and weekends. So we really provide that balance so that they can remain active in their on-the-job learning. As I mentioned at Front Range, most of our related instruction is delivered in the first 20 weeks of our apprenticeship program. And then our apprentices sit for their industry recognized credential so that they can expand their on-the-job learning and their role with the employer. So Front Range offers, I was going to give a specific example of an apprenticeship program of sterile processing technician. And Ames is now working with Banner, and we have Kaylin here as well that can answer some questions about Ames's program. And one of the benefits of the sterile processing technician apprenticeship is that at our colleges, we can assist in recruitment. So we can help match the industry with those students at our institutions that are interested in getting into these healthcare arenas. One of the difficulties is we have at Front Range over 85 students that are interested in sterile processing, but when they go to apply for a position, they're not certified, they're not registered, and they don't apply. When those employers start listing that as an apprenticeship occupation with no credentialing or experience required, it increases the number of those applicants. And Front Range, and I know Ames can assist our employers with that. One item to note is that those employers do select and hire the apprentices, but the colleges do help onboard and provide the related instruction. Our medication aid is another example. We are working with Columbine and Pathways to upskill their current CNA workforce. We will be providing the instruction, and their clinical hours will be done on site in a paid role. We've been able to develop this as a 5-week training program, and we're excited right now. We're working on our state board of approval. So these are 2 examples of our apprenticeship program. And I'm not going to show this, but this is a YouTube video that we did with Associates in Family Medicine, some of our other employers, that really highlights the benefits to the employer and to the apprentice. So we have just a few minutes. I will stop sharing. I will look in the chat, and Nikki, I think people have the ability to unmute and ask questions. So I will open it up to any questions.
Hi, this is Carol, and I do have a question. Maybe for Nancy. On your slide, you listed LPN as a current apprenticeship and registered nurse resident. What does that mean?
Nancy, I can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, why don't you do that? I have not had direct contact with either of those 2.
Okay, so Carol, the residency program is actually done with Banner, and that actually right now is a industry recognized registered apprenticeship, which is a kind of like an apprenticeship light. It's a little bit different. However, those are no longer being supported by the U.S. Department of Labor. So there is opportunity to look into nurse residency. One of the issues with that is that the State Board of Nursing has very strict requirements. So this can only be post them passing their state boards. We are, Community College of Denver does have an LPN apprenticeship program. However, their current nursing program is not accredited, and that allows them to apprentice. We are working up in Northern Colorado with Front Range, because we do have an accredited LPN program, to get the pathway and possible waivers from our accrediting board. So we have the State Board of Nursing, which has been open to looking at apprenticeship, but we also have our accrediting boards. So we're still playing in that area to apprenticeship those occupations.
Does anything need to be changed legislatively or just through the boards?
Probably through the board, and I'm probably not the right person to fully answer that. As you know, that we are working as a sector partnership to look at that nursing shortage, and this is one of the areas that we're looking at. We kind of, as we're growing this apprenticeships in healthcare, we're kind of starting with the wins, which are easier to gain, like the medical assisting and the CNA. But I will tell you, my goal before I retire is to get a nursing apprenticeship pathway. So I hope I stay young so I can continue to do that. Yes.
And Carol, the board is really very restrictive on what we can do in Colorado. So for example, in Arizona, we are developing these nurse externship programs, which is not technically a apprenticeship, but it fits the model pretty well. And the nurse externs in Arizona can do a lot of stuff independently, and up here, not so much.
So there sounds like there's opportunity.
I think there's great opportunities with the board on that.
Okay.
I do too. And I think
That would
it's
benefit every one of us in the healthcare industry. Yep.
yeah. And go
I'll
ahead.
jump in. There are 2 registered nurse residency programs here in the state.
Mhm.
So the Center for Nursing Excellence and
That's right.
True, I can't think of the name off the top of my head. So they are registered programs. And so the difference between kind of the nursing registered apprenticeship program, which is a non-apprenticable program because of the licensure, and the nurse residence, is that they have their licensure. And so it's afterwards that they become the apprentice. And so those programs are working really nicely and are really fitting a lot of employer needs kind of to step into that role and to meet some of those shortages. So I know either of those organizations would be more than happy to chat about kind of what their models look like. But we see those across the country as kind of stepping in to help a little bit with some of those shortages.
Okay,
Thank you, Melissa. And to answer, Sally, your question, yes, one of our goals with apprenticeships is to promote that livable wage. And that's why we're also looking at not just apprenticeshiping entry-level positions, but how do we upskill like that certified med aid? And in most of our apprenticeships, we actually give that wage increase when they pass their industry certification. So they're getting wage increases along the way that supports them.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you so much. Because I've been in conversations with a lot of other different organizations. I just had one with Dr. Cog, and that was one of the things that came up was, yeah, we can offer these great apprenticeship programs to cultivate this pipeline, but then how do we get to keep this talent in Colorado?
Yes.
And so I'm happy to hear that. That's fantastic. Thanks.
Yep. And I think we just have about 1 minute. Thank you, Nikki. Steve, you have a hand raised.
Real quick. You had a slide that listed all the apprenticeship programs and programs that are available. How is that list developed? And is that through the health sector community, or how was that list developed?
I'm going to let Melissa take that one because that's go ahead.
Yeah. So the U.S. Department of Labor created a list of apprenticeable occupations kind of a long time ago. So that's where that list comes from. And then we can always add additional occupations. Maybe they didn't think of something. So really it is industry driven as far as, what occupations can become apprenticeable.
Okay.
So Steve, we can add occupations. In my experience, we tend to find one that is most common and has common denominators. And since they're customizable, as Melissa mentioned, you can actually customize, like for example, for medical assisting, we customized it for ophthalmology technician. We're working on that. So there's a lot of flexibility in customizing, or you can start a new pathway.
Yeah, I was more interested in whether or not the health sector community they were expressing a particular need in those areas, and that list represented the need from the health sector community instead of the government saying, oh, here's some programs for you.
Well, and I know we have to transition, Nikki, but to answer that, Steve, yes, we work with our healthcare sector partnerships across the state to look at industry needs. And the ones that were highlighted in red were developed specifically in Colorado with input from the healthcare sector partnership.
And real quick, how much assistance is given to the employer to develop the apprenticeship program? Or are they on their own, or do they get a lot of help?
A lot of help. And a lot of that funding is to support the employer. And so, because this is a new arena.
Okay.
And I know Nikki would like us to transition. Melissa, Nancy, myself, and Kaylin, please put Kaylin is at Ames Community College with doing the apprenticeship with Banner. We'll put our emails in the chat, and feel free to reach out to us, and Nikki will get those slides sent out to you if you want to learn more about apprenticeships. Thank you.
Thanks everyone for that great dialogue, and please do follow up if you have questions. We will get those slides out for information for you. We're going to shift now to a COVID update. I'd like to welcome our Larimer County Public Health team. We have Public Health Director Tom Gonzalez, Senior Population Epidemiologist Jared Olson, and Dr. Paul Mayer, Chief Medical Officer. Thanks for being here.
Well, thanks for having us, Joanna, and it's great seeing everybody here on this wintry morning, blistery wintry morning. To kick this off before I turn it over to Dr. Olson to kind of give us where we're at, the overview, and then to Dr. Mayer a little more on the therapeutics piece, and then I'll wrap it up. It's just what a different situation we are right now than the last time I was in front of all of you. Things are looking much better. Jared will certainly go over that. I think we're in a much different situation, in a much more positive situation as we start seeing a very bright light at the end of the tunnel. So with that said, it certainly isn't over. There will be a transition period. We'll talk a little bit about that. What does that mean? And how does the healthcare community fit in that? I think is real important. So with that, I will turn it over to Jared to give us an update on the metrics status and overall picture of COVID-19 in Larimer County in Colorado.
Thanks, Tom. Yes, absolutely. Tom's exactly right. So if we take a quick look at our case rate, today's numbers just pulled from this morning from the dashboard as compared to 120. And for example, our case rate actually rose to 100 and over 1,500 on this particular day just because of backfilling and the data delays. But we've seen a 90% drop in our case rate, an 80% drop in our test positivity, right, which is an indication of how many true cases we're capturing in the community. And we know when this is elevated, we're missing a lot of cases. We've seen hospitalizations with COVID dropping by 70%. And finally, after our long weekend, we saw a really good drop in our ICU, which was, of course, what we would expect that to be the last thing, because those hospital stays can be, 6 days, 12 days, 21 days, sometimes up to a month, right? So most of the folks who are in the ICU with COVID are there for more than 2 weeks. So we're finally seeing that drop as a function mostly of COVID, but also of some reduction in other issues, it appears, as well. All right. So one of the things we do is we continue to watch wastewater monitoring, because that is a piece that's proven crucial, mainly for detecting when we know that our testing availability and testing supply is limited. So we can see a very clear Omicron peak, almost the exact same time period for our wastewater as the actual peak in our cases. But that gives us a sense on the way down about whether the declines we're seeing are true declines, whether we should trust them. We want to see multiple data sources in order to affirm this. And that's exactly what we're seeing, a really nice smooth decline, slowing just a little bit here. And now it's a little bit bouncier now that it's at the bottom. This is City of Loveland, but we look at all of the watersheds from Wellington down to Berthoud that are available to us, right? Of course, much of the county is also on septic systems that we don't have access to. We're also falling in a similar pattern to the metro counties, though they're a bit ahead of us. I'll touch on that later. Just to give you a sense of the Omicron wave in general and how different it is from prior waves, right? Wild type, Alpha, Delta, and then Omicron here. The black dashed line is our case rate. You can see our Omicron cases, which we know we weren't capturing all of them, dwarfs any prior time period. Hospitalizations rise, but not as severe or as sharply as Delta hospitalizations. This is just folks from Larimer County, just residents from Larimer County. So not everybody in our hospitals that might be in Larimer, however. And then most strikingly, I think, is this ICU line down here. So a really tough period of admissions to the ICU for an extended period of time during the wild type, that's pre-vaccine. A little bit during Alpha, really long, slow slog with Delta. Delta was really tough on our county. And then, a little bit elevated above baseline during Omicron, but not that severe. So that was all very promising and gives us confidence kind of moving forward, at least under the current scenario and situation. just to give you a sense of the state overall, this is where we were on the 24th. Almost everybody was above 500. Many of these counties were above 1,000 or above 1,500 for case rate. And we're just, a month later in a radically different position. Most of our metro counties have dropped below 100 cases per 100,000. And we know that we're following a trajectory similar to those counties and very well may be there within a week or so. Today we're 148. I expect that to rise a little bit, but we're getting closer to this. Boulder will probably drop under that threshold in a few days as well. Okay, so that's all current conditions. Why do we have confidence kind of about this situation moving forward? It's simply because we have immunity at levels we've never seen during this pandemic. So we see this big boost in immunity associated almost entirely with vaccination starting in 2021. Vaccination kind of levels out as eligibility has increased during the summer months and there isn't a lot of demand. We get a little bump here with boosters and maybe the Delta wave with some infection. And then we get this big boost here as boosters open up. They kind of open up November, but most of this increase here is going to be Omicron, right? So Omicron infections were so widely spread. There were so many breakthroughs that it really enhanced that kind of level of population immunity. And we know that this will decay, right? So both the vaccines and infection, their ability to keep you from being a symptomatic case in the future decline over time, right? Those antibody levels in your body drop. But we do anticipate that this is a solid bridge until the summer months. And we could see outbreaks and spikes even with 80% immunity. But this is just a fundamentally different place than we've been before. So this is even better picture when we look at severe disease, obviously crucial for the healthcare systems. We know there's multiple elements to the immune system response. If you've seen COVID as a vaccine, if you've seen COVID as an infection or a breakthrough infection, all of that helps build some of your body's immune response. So we expect that immunity to hospitalizations or protection against severe disease will remain even higher than protection from symptomatic cases. And that will help continue to protect that capacity within our hospital system. Of course, all of this is dependent on the Omicron variant and what we have right now. If we see a change in our variants, we may see a change in our circumstances, right? So Omicron changed the game from Delta, Delta changed it from Alpha. We've seen these sequences before and we'll continue to monitor that and reevaluate that. Wastewater is also a great option for that because we can do detections in that even as much of our testing moves towards an at-home or rapid space. Okay, there's been some discussion at the state level, nationally, internationally about BA2, which has been a problem for, Denmark to a certain degree. It's continued to increase their cases, at least. I don't know if it's been a true problem for their hospital systems. What we have in Colorado is something different. We have not seen BA2 really get a foothold substantially within the United States, or especially in Colorado. That's this green line down here with the error bar. You can barely see it. BA3 is another one that doesn't seem to be spreading very rapidly and hasn't really taken off anywhere. The interesting thing here is we have BA1, which is the original Omicron, and BA11, which is a subvariant that's more infectious and more closely related to BA1. And it seems that this BA11 variant has become the dominant variant in Colorado and maybe suppressing the ability for BA2 to really take off. We've also seen in Denmark that they did a very small study, 43 cases of reinfection. So somebody who had BA1 and also got BA2. The majority of those were unvaccinated individuals, but the likelihood of a reinfection of Omicron, so BA1 first and then BA2, is still quite low. So most of what we think we're seeing, even internationally, when there are places that cases continue to rise with BA2, South Africa is another example of this. They're seeing mostly new infections, with BA2 being somewhat more infectious than BA1 and not really a new pandemic on top of the original Omicron one. So at worst, what we've seen most modelers and most folks anticipate is that BA2, if it were to increase, would slow down the decline, but not reverse it. This is something similar to what we saw in the UK. It kind of plateaued their decline for a bit and then they continued their decline. But at this point, with over 80% BA11, that may not occur at all. So I'll hand it over to Dr. Mayer, who I know wanted to talk a little bit about the severity of BA2 potentially, since that's been a topic of discussion, as well as therapeutics.
Yeah, we just wanted to touch on this, mostly to reassure folks. There's been kind of different things in the media, but the studies out of South Africa and Denmark support that BA2 really does not seem to be clinically more severe than the original Omicron. And so that's where it's at. Like I said, there's been some pre-printed release reports, but nothing validated that suggests that it's more severe. And then I was just going to talk briefly about therapeutics. I just wanted to list the therapeutics in order of preference. And basically to give a little bit of good news, which is that as cases drop and the production of the therapeutics increases, we're seeing a much improved ratio of the availability of therapeutics to those who need them. And also remember that, Omicron won't be our last variant. And as new variants emerge, there is some reason for optimism. Drugs like Paxlovid are expected to maintain their effectiveness against new variants, just the way they work, the protease inhibitors. It's going to be harder for the virus to escape them. So I think that's all really very good news, actually. And then back to Tom.
All right. Thank you, Jared and Dr. Mayer. I appreciate that. Really, really good news. And it's important moving forward for everyone to understand that late January, early February, when we made the change to expire the public health order based upon what we were seeing with our metrics in the overall situation with COVID-19, it was a recommendation to step down from a requirement for wearing masks to a recommendation. Very different than in the spring of 2021, where it really was you can remove your mask. So we are still seeing to see a high level of mask wearing in some areas within the county and indoors, and that's great. We want to be a mask-friendly area if that's what the comfort level is for those individuals. We do know we have more flexible layers of precaution. That could be ventilation, filtration, spacing, shortening time periods, and other approaches of masks are not viable. I think that's been the big question with our schools. And our schools have done a fantastic job of prioritizing in-person learning. We know that's so important for mental health, for our teachers and our kids, our community is keeping our kids in-person learning. And they've not, besides masks, they've done a lot of other things, seat assignments, cohorting, spacing, etc., to reduce the spread of the virus in the schools. So even without masks, we feel there's a high level of layer protections within our schools, and we continue to see cases dropping in schools, primarily, as Jared pointed out, just due to the overall community immunity that we have established here, not only in Larimer County, Colorado, and the United States. I think it's really important to know the part of our decision was the availability, I should say, of rapid testing. Now we can get tests brought to our homes with antigen testing. We do still have the Mako test sites. Many of our healthcare providers are still providing testing. So a much different space than we were even in Delta, where it was taking 4 or 5 days to get a test result back. High quality masks, we've been working closely with the state, our libraries, our fire districts to get N95s, KN95 masks out to people. So not just wearing a mask to protect others from the respiratory droplets, but to protect yourself as well. We've seen a lot of businesses participate in that effort to keep their staff and workers safe. And then as Dr. Mayer just pointed out, we hope to see the treatment supply more readily soon, and we're starting to see that. In fact, we now have a pharmacy in town that has Paxlovid. We're starting to see it open up, at least the distribution channels, and we expect to see more and more each week. So that is really important as we get moving forward on our transition, really to reduce the severe burden of disease, especially on our hospitals. But it's really, really important that we all communicate that it's early on in the life cycle of the COVID-19, you need to get treatment early. So if you show symptoms, test early, get treatment early. Rapid home test, if you're positive, we're going to make sure people know what the next steps are so that they can access that treatment. Now, what's the next? We talked about future plans, and here's where we all play a part. I think it's important that we are talking about a transition from a pandemic suppression activities towards routine disease control and surveillance measures. Now, when we say a transition, That's not a flip of the switch. That's a time period, and we're going to be working on that over the next several months. Now, what I'm talking about here, it's not normal to get in your car and run to a church parking lot to get tested or to go get vaccinated. We're talking about more routine disease control strategies where you go to your primary care provider, you go to a certain situation where you're getting tested, where you're getting the vaccine. So we're looking at that transition about how we get to more normal, more routine disease control, and certainly with surveillance. We're not going to be doing the aggressive contact tracing just due to the immunity that we've achieved, but we will be looking at clusters, outbreaks, just like we do any disease, whether that's pertussis, hepatitis A. So even our team here at the health department, our epidemiologists and our disease control specialists, we're starting to make that transition as well, starting that off with our schools. One thing that I think Jared hit on, and it's very, very important, is continuing to monitor our wastewater for viral load. We do have funding coming from the feds to the state to continue monitoring. We do appreciate the partnership with all of our wastewater sheds, including the City of Fort Collins and Colorado State University in Wellington, Loveland, Berthoud at Estes Park, for all participating. And this is a really good early warning indicator. Studies show you're shedding the virus 2 to 3 days prior to even being contagious. So if we can see an early spike, we can then, react and provide the good layers of protection to reduce an outbreak. I think it's important that we continue to update reporting and dating on new data on new potential variants. So we'll continue to work with the state health department and others, making sure we understand if there are any variants of concern within the world and what does that mean for us. Again, it's really important to have a plan together for our community, just like we did for vaccines, an equitable approach to making sure everybody has access to antiviral treatments if they are eligible. So I think that's important for us all to consider. And then just continue to prepare for localized outbreaks and possible future spikes. If somebody the other day said, well, pull out your crystal ball, Tom, and my crystal ball hasn't been correct much of the 2 years. It's been such a roller coaster. But I would predict that this next fall, we will have an uptick of some sort. Probably have some waning immunity, whether that's from natural immunity or vaccine. And we're going to have to make sure that we are handling outbreaks and clusters in a very effective manner. It won't be anything like we've been doing, prior, like in Delta, because of the immunity. And also, we are hearing there will be a booster or fourth, fifth shot, whatever they're going to call it, coming in. So we'll have to be geared up to support our community, those that want to get boosted, so we have increased immunity and vaccination. So I think that's part of the planning that we all be working on as we move forward here in this transition from pandemic to more routine disease control. So with that, I will open it up for any questions, comments, or concerns.
Thank you, Tom. Any questions this morning? Feel free to unmute yourself and address our public health team here.
Hey, Tom, a quick question on the plaques Lovid. Is that a pill form or how is that distributed?
Dr. Mayer?
Yeah, so the Paxlovid is a pill. It's actually 2 pills. It's nirmatrelvir and ritonavir, and it's a 5-day course. It has to be begun within 5 days of symptom onset. It has a lot of drug-to-drug interactions, so it's important that people coordinate that with their primary care doctor. But it is convenient for sure.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Okay, well, thank you, Tom, Jared, and Dr. Mayer for joining us this morning and for your update. And I'm sure everybody here this morning appreciates the optimism you shared with us. We are definitely enjoying that trajectory. Thanks for being here.
Well, thanks for having us and have a great day.
You too. We will shift gears now to our talent pipeline report this morning. Caitlin McKinney is joining us. She is the talent pipeline analyst with CWDC and the Colorado Department of Higher Education. Caitlin, thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me. I'm just going to share my screen really fast and start. All right, let me know if you can see that okay.
All good, thank you.
Perfect. I'm just going to pop off camera just for bandwidth issues, but I'll be back on. All right. So good morning, healthcare industry leaders and partners. And thank you so much for inviting me to discuss this year's talent pipeline report with you. My name is Caitlin McKinney. As Joanne just mentioned, I'm the talent pipeline analyst shared between the Workforce Development Council and the Department of Higher Ed. This morning, I'm going to give you an overview of the 2021 report by discussing some of our central findings that we saw this year through our data lens at a statewide level. And then I'm going to provide a deeper dive discussion on the economic outlook for Northern Colorado, specifically for the healthcare sector. So why does this report matter? The CWDC, in partnership with CDHE, began publishing the Talent Pipeline Report annually in 2014, making December's launch event the 8th annual release of the report. And every year we've tried to make tweaks and add nuances to make its content as relevant as possible for the state of Colorado. For those of you who might not be too familiar with the report, this publication is meant to provide key insights on Colorado's economic outlook and needs surrounding talent in our state. And this essentially does two things. First, it gives us a better understanding of where the future of work is headed in Colorado. And second, it offers strategies and resources which will help policymakers make informed decisions to bolster the statewide workforce system and build Colorado back better than it was before. Today, I'm going to mention Colorado's top jobs a lot. So I wanted to quickly go over what we mean when we say top jobs. We apply CDLE's Office of Labor Market Information data projections to define roles as top jobs if they meet the 3 criteria that are listed on this slide. Basically, these are occupations that are in high demand, have strong potential to grow over the next 10 years, and provide wages that are able to cover life's necessary expenses. And for this last point, we have strongly depended on the MIT Living Wage Calculator each year, and they categorize living wages into 2 different earning tiers. In 2021, Tier 1 top jobs are defined as those making at least $31.19 per hour, which is estimated to be an efficient earning threshold for a family of 3 in Colorado, provided that only 1 adult is working. Tier 2 top jobs are defined as those earning $16.35 hourly, and this threshold is estimated to be sufficient in covering expenses of 1 working individual in the state. Now, the key takeaway from this slide is, well, life costs more, yet jobs in Colorado are paying more. In 2021, the living wage floor threshold for top jobs in the state has shifted upwards by more than $6 per hour for Tier 1 top jobs and just about $3 an hour for Tier 2 top jobs. And there are several drivers that we can discuss that factor into this outcome. First, MIT adjusted their modeling methodology last year. And the reason being was to account for things like childcare costs and regional differences in expenses, such as groceries, housing, and transportation. So while this is a more accurate way of modeling, it did boost our wage levels higher than we've seen in previous years. We've also had recent legislation that picks up the minimum wage here in our state to keep up with inflation. And the third compounding point to highlight is that we've seen a lot of market competitiveness across sectors in Colorado, which has resulted in local employers offering higher wages to attract and retain their staff. So putting all of this together, we are left with a situation where labor market demand is stronger than market supply in Colorado. So when we restrict our sample down to county level and only observe Denver County, we can see that this base level living wage is upticked further than the general state level, with Tier 1 top jobs being $1.47 more than the statewide amount, and Tier 2 top jobs living wage being $1.05 more than the statewide level. This of course means that it is more expensive for Coloradans to live along the Front Range. So to make a good living, jobs in Denver County need to pay more than other locations within the state. Applying the same method for Wells County, we can notice the calculated living wage is a lot less costly compared to the Front Range area, with Tier 2 top jobs living wage being about $3 less than Tier 1 top jobs, and Tier 1 top jobs living wage equating to about $3.69 less relative to Denver County. The figure on this slide depicts that Tier 1 top jobs typically require higher education levels than Tier 2 top jobs, with 90.7% of Tier 1 top jobs requiring a credential past high school. Keeping this in mind, however, it is important to note that last year, 10.8% of Tier 1 top job opportunities were made available to job seekers, starting out with only a high school diploma. And jobs in this category employed a pool of roughly 38,000 Coloradans. Now I'm going to talk a little bit more about labor force demand in Colorado and what employers and industry sectors are telling us about the direction of our economy. This chart displays some of our top jobs by different attainment levels. Here we are measuring demand based on the projected number of annual openings between 2020 through 2030. And the number that is shown directly, below the occupation title. Tier 2 top jobs are written in blue text and Tier 1 top jobs are indicated in green. The key takeaways is that the data is showing us is that while there is and has been a strong correlation between educational attainment of degree programs and labor participation across the state, we are also seeing an increased demand for individuals with shorter term non-degree credentials across top jobs. So this slide points out that some jobs have seen faster employment recovery rates than others since the pandemic. And the figure on this slide showcases the fastest payroll job recovery rates by industry sectors in Colorado. As of September, transportation, warehousing, and utilities, management of companies and enterprises, IT, and wholesale trade sectors have fully rebounded, with recovery rates surpassing their pre-pandemic levels. Retail, trade, other sectors, which is generally associated with jobs falling into labor, leisure, and hospitality occupations, and accommodation and food services have payroll recovery rates that continue to climb at a rapid pace, yet still have not fully recovered to their pre-pandemic levels. On this slide, we see Colorado's top posted occupations between March 2020 through the end of August last year. These roles align with the previous slide detailing Colorado's sectors with the fastest payroll recovery rates, as 4 out of 5 of the top postings seen here are associated with one of those industries. Registered nurses, however, have not seen a quick employment recovery, and this signals that there is a supply and demand gap for RNs in our state. This slide shows Colorado's top 10 sought after skills that employers have been looking for across job seekers, and these numbers are based on unique online job postings in the state between March 2020 and June 2021. In order of relevance, these essential skills include planning, detail-oriented, innovation, leadership, problem solving, operations, customer service, communications, management, and sales. Now I'm going to highlight major occupational groups by race and ethnicity in our state for 2021. This slide highlights where the majority of each demographic group works in Colorado based on race and ethnicity. And if you look across the occupations in all 3 columns, you will see mostly similar role titles, but you can also notice a significant gap in median annual wage levels. So given that many of these occupations match across race and ethnicity groups relative to the median annual wage levels, we can see that there are still major disparities in terms of pay range across racial demographics in our state. As mentioned earlier, every year we try to add more nuances to the report, and now I'm just going to showcase one of our new resource developments that we've added in 2021. Beginning February of this year, we were given the opportunity to partner with a national organization called the Bridging the Talent Gap. And through this partnership, we employed a nationally normed labor market survey that was targeted at employers with the intention of producing a statewide representation of Colorado's employers. We did our best to equally observe all regions of the state and include responses associated with every organization size, while prioritizing 4 focus industries in particular, including retail, healthcare, IT, and advanced manufacturing. In total, roughly 600 employers participated across the state. And this data is so valuable to us because it showcases a different employer data set and their viewpoints on skills needs and where possible gaps are in the labor market. So now I'm going to briefly mention some of our key findings we saw in this year's data. Here we can see what skills are most important to employer respondents in the state. And from the management line up, all our skills that employers identified as being somewhat to very important for hiring staff members. While most of this list overlaps with the top skills employers mention through job posting data, this is also very valuable to us because it reinforces that these skills are what we need to focus on and ensure that our education programs and our supportive services are providing the adequate resources to support skill development for our talent pool. Another key outcome across respondents when asked their opinion on conditions since the pandemic showed that businesses across the board have been faced with significant hiring challenges, yet the importance of education and credentials have stayed roughly the same, as well as the need for skill attainment and competencies. So we are seeing interesting components around employers having the need to upskill their labor force and wanting to engage in training programs and partnerships with higher ed institutions to advance their employment pool. Now I'm going to mention some key takeaways on Colorado's labor force supply. This section focuses on how well we as a state are doing at producing individuals with the skills needed to obtain good jobs. This year's section of the report focuses on the portion of Colorado's workforce who identifies individuals with disabilities. What was interesting to see is that employment of people with disabilities has surpassed pre-pandemic levels and reached historic highs in recent months, with this cohort's labor force participation rate reaching nearly 37% in October 2021, which is the highest recording since the Bureau of Labor Statistics began tracking employment numbers in 2008. This is a boost of about 10.5% relative to the same time last year and holds a magnitude significantly higher than the year-over-year increase across the non-disabled workforce, who only saw an uptick of about 0.5% when comparing the periods. So this is a key indication that people with disabilities are recovering faster than people without disabilities. And we can expect this labor force to continue to grow as more individuals with disabilities are provided opportunities for employment and enter the market. So as I briefly mentioned a few slides ago, in our supply section, we look at our labor force, and as you can see in this figure, while the projections for Colorado's total population show a 12.4% growth rate overall for the next 10 years, the biggest jumps in population change are expected to be from our older age groups. And this is an important point to highlight as we think about our changing labor force and how we can prepare and support that younger population as well as the older groups, so that at both ends of the age distribution, people are capable of entering and remaining in Colorado's labor force as long as they want to or need to. So equity is one of the most important themes that we highlight throughout this year's report, but the data shows that we continue to see equity gaps in Colorado's labor force. And as I go over the next few slides, it's important to note that these equity gaps across demographic groups were significant issues in Colorado prior to the pandemic, and once the pandemic did set in, have been further exacerbated. So the figure on this slide shows the 2020 labor force participation in Colorado separated by gender identity and race and ethnicity. One of the biggest drops we've seen has been from women's labor force participation rates in the state, and particularly from women identifying as Black or African American. And there's a big threshold of factors that are attributed to this outcome, but some of the major drivers result from a large portion of this demographic pool having low paying and or vulnerable jobs that were impacted by the pandemic. There are also many compacting factors impacting this issue associated with childcare and wage gaps across genders. So as we highlight these findings, it's crucial that we make sure that our recommendations are equally supporting all of Colorado's populations in the best way possible. Additionally, there are significant disparities in post-secondary credential attainment across different race and ethnicity groups in our state. So as we move forward, providing adequate resources and diverse options for credential attainment to all of Colorado's demographic groups will be crucial in ensuring that every Coloradan is provided with opportunities for advancement. And this will also be a major stepping stone as we try to reach our goal of 66% attainment across all groups by 2025. So to make this presentation most relevant for everyone listening today, I've tailored the following slides to focus solely on the healthcare industry across the Northern Colorado region. The data source I used is MZ Burning Glass Econometric Modeling Platform, which provides up-to-date labor force information, mainly through job posting analytics at the national, state, and local levels. So this data was pulled for this presentation yesterday on February 22nd. And in the next few slides, I will discuss the current occupational snapshot the data is showcasing for the healthcare sector in Northern Colorado. So during 2021, there were 128 healthcare occupations in 8 Northern Colorado counties. These counties are indicated in blue on the map on this slide and vary in contrast by the number of job openings that were filed during 2021. The counties with the highest number of job opportunities during the last year were from the very eastern 3. These were Larimer, Boulder, and Weld counties. Overall, the data indicates that Northern Colorado's healthcare sector is experiencing an aggressive hiring competition over an average supply of regional talent. So in the first figure on the left, we can see that job openings are just a slight downtick from the national average, which for an area of this size roughly equates to 116,000. The data behind the middle figure is showing us that the cost for talent is about average in Northern Colorado. The national median salary for these occupations is roughly $52.5 thousand, while employers will pay nearly $55,000 in this region. The final figure depicts demand in this area relative to national levels, and we can see that competition from online job postings is very high in this region. The national average for an area about this size is 3.6 thousand job postings per month, while in Northern Colorado, there are about 5.4 thousand. So this slide just reinforces how strong demand is for the healthcare industry sector in the region of the state. In the past 12 months, there were 4,214 employers competing who posted job openings for the healthcare sector in this area. And in total, there were about 65,000 unique job postings for this sector over the past year. So this slide shows demographic details for the sector by region. And you can see it's primarily female dominated, with 71.2% of workers identifying as female and 28.8% of employees associated with the sector identifying as males. And lastly, this slide highlights the graduate pipeline for healthcare in Northern Colorado. And you can see that there were 274 programs that have produced graduates in this region, with nearly 18,000 individuals completing programs for the healthcare sector degree types in this region. And thank you so much for listening today. I am happy to answer any questions you might have. I also left my email on the last slide, so if anyone has any follow-up questions, please feel free to reach out to me at any time.
Thank you, Caitlin. Do we have any questions for Caitlin this morning? Feel free to unmute yourself. Okay, we will transition to our next topic. Caitlin, thanks for joining us this morning and sharing that data. Very important for our work here with the sector partnership. We're going to switch over to some sector partnership updates to close out our morning. I'm going to invite Evan Hyatt to chat with us with an update on our workforce committee.
Joanne, I'm going to step in.
Sorry about that. Go ahead.
No problem. Thank you. We have been busy in our workforce committee. We have been recently meeting, and a couple of the updates from our subcommittees. Susan Scott with Thompson Valley School District heads up our work-based learning subcommittee, and we have live chats that we had done for the last year with COVID in availability. Those are available on YouTube if anybody is interested in reviewing those. We are doing a lot of career exploration panel discussions that have been well attended. We did those virtually and are looking how to bring those back in person. Some virtual job shadowing had been done, and really focusing on more work-based learning opportunities. So that subcommittee has been active in that area. And then our Get Into the Gut subcommittee is chaired by Nick Peterson, who has done an excellent job of transitioning. We had done these previously with our employers, and due to COVID, we were able to host our first one in the fall at Front Range Community College. We had great attendance and lots of hands-on experience for those students. Our goal is to get students really interested in learning about various careers in healthcare, and we are looking to expand that to more school districts in Weld and Larimer counties. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Caroline, welcome to provide an update on our Behavioral Health Committee.
Good morning. And so we are heavy in event planning right now with the Behavioral Health Committee, but I'll talk about that in just a second. So we've been working on our resource video library that is on YouTube, the same channel that Chris just mentioned. We would love your support promoting content and bumping up views. These videos are really, really helpful for career seekers and just learning about different careers, different opportunities in the area. We are working right now with the co-responder program at Summit Stone Health Partners and Loveland Police Department and Larimer County Sheriff's Office to create a Day in the Life video there, which will be really exciting and fun. If you're interested in, if you have a suggestion for a Day in the Life video, please contact us, or if you're interested in getting involved or have any questions, please contact Joanne or I. And then thanks to grant funding from Behavioral Health Services with the county, we are able to put 2 forums on this year. One is tomorrow with CSU and Front Range. It will be a really neat opportunity for industry leaders and educators to connect and talk about next steps in the future of the behavioral health workforce. And then we have another one scheduled for April 13th. This one will hopefully be in person with UNC. If you have any questions about that, would like to get involved in any capacity, please contact Anna Bondriel. And that really exciting stuff happening. Hopefully all of you have heard about our career exploration event that is happening Wednesday, March 2nd on site at UNC. We are very, very excited to be back in person. Again, our first event was around that same time, right before the pandemic hit in 2020. And then we were virtual last year. And now we're doing a hybrid event at UNC, and then people can pop on Zoom as well. It is open to college and high school students. In college, we're talking about undergraduate and graduate students. We have 2 panel discussions and then a myriad of breakout sessions as well for people to learn about the various career pathways associated with behavioral health. And we are just really, really excited about this event. And gosh, it is just right around the corner. So if you have any questions at all, if you would like to host a table at the event, if you'd like to attend, if you have any questions whatsoever, please contact Crystal Smith, who I believe is on the call today.
Thanks, Caroline.
Thanks,
Here's the contact information for our committee chairs. If you need to reach any additional members of the team that were referenced in the updates today, you can go through our general NOCO health sector email that Nikki chatted earlier today. Quick update on our PASRR committee. This is the pre-admission screening and resident review that Yvonne Myers chaired. They did such great work. We are sunsetting this committee. The program has made great strides, and they have some great technology in place going forward. So this committee will fold out. We do thank Yvonne for her leadership for all the great work that's done with improving the PASRR. And next, we'd like to invite you to our next meetings. We do anticipate being back in person starting in May. So the 25th will be the next meeting. That will be, I believe, at the ranch, back where we used to house our quarterly meetings. August 24th, Front Range Community College has graciously offered to host that. So look for more details on that one. And then note our November meeting is adjusted due to the Thanksgiving holiday. We hope to see you at these next quarterly meetings. Do look for a follow-up from our meeting today with slides and information shared out on what was presented. And do please engage with our presenters from today. Again, you can connect with any of those through getting in touch with Nikki for the NOCO email address. Steve, do you have an additional question or comment?
Yes, ma'am. How do you get on the mailing list, or so we can keep them?
You just did. Nikki will, through her good ears this morning, connect you with the mailing list. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Nikki.
Glad you joined us this morning. Any other questions or comments this morning before we let you get on with your snowy day? Thanks for the additional engagement and interest in the chat. We will get you connected to the sector partnership. Sally, thank you. Nikki has also put a link to our career pathways, the behavioral health event that Caroline just updated you on. There's a link to the more information there and how to get registered. Thank you.
We get copies of the slides.
We will do a follow-up email to participants this morning with the slides that were shared today, all that great information. Yep, need more time to digest it. And our YouTube page link is also in the chat. Check that out. There's some really great videos there. Please share that widely. It's a great inspiration for our youth. Alrighty, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for your participation today. Great meeting, great discussion. And we will see you all in May.